April 30th, year over year. So it does add additional work for the committee as well as staff and for council to deal with another report. But we would leave that for council's discretion. The way the resolution is worded is that council supports or rejects the proposal. So perhaps that could be just noted when a vote is placed. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Baird, and I'll go to Mayor Luke first and then Councillor Black.
Well, I appreciate the work of TDAB, Mr. Chair, and a question to Mr. Baird. Well, I guess maybe it's not a question, maybe it's a comment.
Okay.
And that's probably you want to wait for a motion.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, I thought it was going to be a question, but no, it's not.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to Chris. I did note that we got an email, and I think it was forwarded to you from the St. Vincent de Paul. And I'm not sure what the problem there is. I mean, it was reviewed, their application was reviewed by the committee, and I believe that the committee applied Norfolk County criteria. What is, do you know what their concern is? Why they've emailed all of council? And
Through the chair, these decisions were included in the minutes of the TDAB advisory board that came to council in December. They would generally not be included there, but they ended up there. So I believe that was how the media perhaps had picked up on it, and those applicants were informed at that point prior to this evening that the recommendation was that their application would be refused because it did not meet the specific requirements as outlined under the Municipal Act and council's policy. So that was the rationale. Without getting into greater detail,
the information was released inappropriately, or?
No, it's certainly not private or confidential. We always like to bring this information to council in this format for this decision, but it had been included in the advisory board minutes that come to council regularly. Okay. So it's sort of, that information came out perhaps prematurely, but not inappropriately.
Okay, so that must have been their concern then, but we haven't erred in any way in applying the criteria. No. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Baird. The rejected applications, did they receive a letter?
Through the chair, Councillor Height, council will make that final determination. These are just recommendations to you. If you choose to approve them all or increase or decrease the amount, that's what will go forward. So generally we don't notify them if they're successful. Even those that have been recommended for approval, there's no guarantee until council makes the decision.
Well, thank you for that. I received a call from a few of them that were rejected, but I'm not on the committee that actually passes them. I couldn't help them that way, and I've asked for an update on the qualifications, but maybe it would be helpful if your department were to call those people so that if this funding should pass and there's a second intake in April, that they could reapply and know what they're into. I think maybe there was just some semantics in there that stopped them from receiving it, like St. Vincent's or something like that. But do I have to add that as a recommendation that we contact them and say, or send them a letter or something?
Through the chair, each year when we send out the notification, whether it's successful or not, we do explain to them why, and they're always free to apply for future intakes. In the case of one such that was approved, the recommendation of TDAB group was approved with conditions, and those conditions were that additional information be submitted, and that was followed up immediately, and it was determined that their application was most suitable, and so that's been included in this report. So there are times where a few weeks will go by where we needed additional information to make a decision whether it be favorable or not. But we would certainly let them know that that opportunity exists for future intakes.
Okay, I'm concerned about the 5 people that were rejected, though. I don't really like leaving them with that bad taste in their mouth that they were shut out.
In clarification, as Mr. Baird said, it isn't until tonight that a decision is made on whether or not they are accepted. So why? Right,
and I'm going to move that recommendation right now. I'll move the recommendation in the staff report right now. I would just like the amendment that staff contacted the 5 people that did not meet the qualifications.
And when would you like to have seen that done? After tonight or sometime prior to this evening? I'm
Sometime
just not-
prior
I'm
to
just-
this evening?
Well, I thought that's what you were advocating for.
No, it's within a month or something. I'm not sure. I don't
Absolutely.
want to set a deadline to
Absolutely.
it, but before the April deadline comes around again so that
Absolutely.
they can apply again.
Thank you. I must have misunderstood. And I think Mr. Baird has told us that that has always been the protocol.
Mr. Chair, just to give some assurance to Councillor Height, so these recommendations go forward. Once the budget's approved in the next couple of weeks, we do the check requisitions and we have a cover letter that says, congratulations, you've been approved. And those that don't, we explain why and tell them what their next opportunity is. So we'll be sure to do that. We don't need a motion.
Okay.
Respectfully, we will look after that for you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So are you prepared to move the motion then, Councillor?
So moved.
Thank you. Further speakers, Councillor Brunton and then Mayor Luke.
Well, speaking to the motion, Mr. Chairman, and I can support the grants as allocated, but I do not support another intake on April 30th. Like, I don't know, it's like, hey, we got more money, come and get it. I'm not in that business any longer. We are having a hard time funding what we already have to fund in this municipality, and people have had the chance to apply. The committee's reviewed it. All we're doing is, I'm sure somebody will think something up to get more money. So my answer to another intake is no.
Mayor Luke?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm of the same opinion as the former speaker. We set out to offer up $62,000 every year for grant money to organizations. It's, in my opinion, money very well spent, because most of these organizations that get small amounts of money can do these services much cheaper than if we were to hire, because they have a lot of volunteers. So I think the system is good, but we've had 62,000 up for grabs. We're being asked here to dole out 39, and there's 23 left over. It's not, that money is not burning a hole in my pocket to get rid of. It can be left in reserve for all of 2017 when we sometimes waive fees because we have special requests that we consider, and we often grant that. And at the end of the year, if there's some of that 23 left over, it's taxpayer money. It goes back in the pot for another year. Surplus. So I don't want to start doing 2 and 3 intakes just to get rid of money. I don't like that. This has come once a year. We've done this for the last 15, 16 years. And we've had requests. TDAB has done their job in following the procedure. We're prepared, hopefully, to support 39,000. And the balance is, what is it, burning a hole in our pocket to get rid of this money? To give it away? I don't think so. No, I don't like this another intake. Everybody does it once, a year over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any further speakers? Councillor Sonnenberg and then Brunton for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm reading here Port Rowan Bay Fest and Long Point Country Bay Fest. I wasn't aware that we had 2 Bay Fests down there. Could someone explain, please?
Through the chair, they're one and the same. The first, the first, as noted on that list, is an annual a grant that goes out to Bayfest for $2,000, and in the for the 2017 year intake, that Bayfest organization is seeking to do some additional work, and they've made a request. They had made a request for an additional 5,000, of which the advisory board had recommended only 3. So that's a one-time to deal with an extra initiative that they were hoping to undertake for this year.
Well, I guess my question is, why the 2 names?
Perhaps, well, I would go with the longer name. The other name, just simply Port Rowan Bayfest. That's the way it's defined in the policy. It's been called that since I think it turned over from Tomato Fest years ago. So we'll make sure we can update that for future years.
Councillor Brunton, then Councillor Height.
Mr. Chairman, can I make an amendment to remove that clause to the motion? Amendment to remove the second intake?
Well, actually, the way the motion is worded is that it's either supports or rejects, so I'm going to have to get clarification from Councillor Height. I'm not sure whether he intended to indicate support or reject.
Divide the question.
All right. Okay, then we will be able to deal with your request, Councillor Brunton.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion, either combined or separated? Seeing none, I'm going to deal with the first part of the motion, which will be the first two paragraphs of the report recommendation. Councillor Height has moved that report DCS 17-07, the 2017 municipal grants be received as information, and that those recommended applicants receive their grant funds as outlined in the report with approved funding from the 2017 operating budget. Those in favor of that motion? I see no one opposed, so it is carried. Then, is the remover for the final paragraph to either support or reject the recommendation from the TDAB? Councillor Black. Microphone, please, Councillor. Thank you.
Council rejects the proposed TDAB recommendation.
All right.
Okay, the word reject rather
Okay,
than
thank you.
support.
Speaking to that motion, then, Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the reasons why we left it in there to have the second review wasn't necessarily to burn all that money. It was some of the service groups weren't necessarily aware of it, and they're being made aware of it. As well, this is Canada's 150th birthday, right? I'm as frugal as anybody, but I'm probably not going to see the 200th one. And if some people in Norfolk actually try to get some things going on, it's kind of nice to have that money set aside. I feel this will be a banner year for a lot of festivals in our community, and it's good to keep some powder dry.
Okay, thank you. Further speakers to this motion? Seeing none, then Councillor Black has moved that Council rejects the proposed TDAB recommendation that policy MC-05 be amended to include a second intake deadline of April 30th for any funds that remain unallocated. Any final speakers to that motion? If not, those in favor of the motion to reject that recommendation? I see 5. Those opposed? I see 2. That motion is carried. Thank you very much. We can move on then, Council, to Staff Report DCS 17-06. This is the delegating authority to the General Manager of Development and Cultural Services to sign development agreements. Mr. Baird, please, one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. This is part of our ongoing efforts to streamline our development process and feedback we've received from developers, agents over the last couple of years. We're always looking to save time, not cut corners, but save time. This is what's being proposed, or when a developer completes all the processes and agreements are in place, we have to bring those documents down for Mayor Luke and our clerk, Mr. Grizel, to execute, and they turn those around back to us. And in some cases, they're very quick, but it does take time. When developments get to that stage, there's a registration requirement, and there's a need for a very quick turnaround. And we're just following suit what other progressive municipalities do, and that's council delegating just simply the signatory and dating of those agreements, perfectly legitimate and equally valid as a way to move the process forward by sometimes a week or two. So we put that forward for your consideration, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mayor Luke first.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Baird. If the mayor currently is not around, the deputy mayor signs on his or her behalf. I assume the same thing is with the clerk, deputy clerk situation. What happens, Mr. Baird, if you are away for a vacation, whatever, for say a week or two? Who signs on your behalf if you're away?
Through the chair, I don't take vacation, but no,
Sorry?
I do.
Oh, okay, that's,
the-
your
the-
nose was starting to grow.
Yeah,
Go ahead. But what
The,
what are your thoughts?
The report suggests that it would be my designate, which, as it relates to planning and development, would be Ms. Dusling, as she would be there as the deputy clerk and deputy mayor would be.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further speakers? I'll need someone to move the recommendation in the report. Mayor Luke, thank you for doing so. All right, I'll let you speak to it then.
Well, I have two comments. First of all, number one, I don't, it doesn't really matter to me whether I sign a development agreement or Councillor Wells or Mr. Long. If council authorizes a individual or two or three people to do it, that's who's allowed to do it. That's fine by me. I'm not worried about it. I did have to say I was a little surprised, Mr. Chair, under discussion to read that currently it can take approximately 1 to 2 weeks for signatures to be obtained through the clerk's and mayor's office. I want to assure this council that I don't think I have a bigger priority in my job than to sign documents that are on my desk. And I can tell you, I don't think there has ever been one incident where a document has been held up because my lack of not signing it in an extremely timely fashion. If you talk to my assistant, I'm sure she will tell you that many times I do not even take my coat off when I see the red folder and signatures for development agreement. That's customer service. Get things moving. There are times when if my assistant is not at her desk and I have signed, I will personally bring those documents down to the clerk's department. There are times if they had to be delivered to the cab, this is not regular occurrence, but I have got in my vehicle or walked over to RAB to deliver them to Lydia Harrison or whoever. So I was a little surprised to read 1 or 2 weeks getting it through the mayor and clerk's office. I can't speak for the clerk. He can do that. But I wanted to assure this council that I don't think is a problem with this fellow holding up any signatures. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Further speakers? Councillor Brunton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought about this too, and I prefer that perhaps the mayor continue to sign it or his designate, which case might be the deputy mayor, but filled in a couple, I guess it was a couple of summers ago, and there was a few subdivision agreements, and they were done in a quick manner, and I don't really see a problem with it. And if there is a day or two delay, considering the length of the process for a developer to start to finish, even if it's a couple of days delay, it should not be a burden to any developer. So I'll leave it at the hands that I can't support the report, and I continue with the mayor.
Thank you. Any further speakers? All right, then Mayor Luke has moved that the General Manager of Development and Cultural Services is delegated authority to sign development agreements, site plan, subdivision, and condominium on behalf of Norfolk County. Those in favor of that motion? I see 5. Those opposed? I see 2. The motion does carry. And that will allow us to move down to staff report PW 17-03, which is the award of contract for consultation services relating to Simcoe wastewater treatment facility upgrades. Ms. Robinson, back to you, please.
Through the chairman to council. Before you is PW 1703, which is for the award for the consultant services for the Simcoe wastewater treatment facility. There is a variety of of works being proposed to be done at that facility. The overall budget of the project is in the neighborhood of $13 million. This is for the award of the engineering services. It's $988,106, not including HST. We're pleased with this number. It's actually less than we would typically expect to see on a project of this magnitude, and we are quite confident that the consultant is able to undertake the work, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. First speaker, Councillor Sonnenberg, followed by Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you describe the work to be done on the administration building, please?
Through the chairman, the facility currently is a mismatched max of different buildings and different parts that have all been put together. So this is to, as time has progressed, everything has expanded, and we don't have an administrative facility at that area. So there's no real office space for people to work, et cetera. And so the idea is this will provide the additional workspace, et cetera, for that. It's just really an office space. It's not meant to house staff on multiple staff. It's just for the single operator that's there to have some workspace. It's in compliance with occupational health and safety.
So it's remodeling, it's not building?
Through the chairman to council, it is building, but it's incorporated into all of the other parts of the work that we're going to be doing. So it's an additional, what it was is we'd originally identified several different projects to do all of this work, and we discovered that there would be significant cost savings if we tendered out all of the work together. And so that's why it's been identified that, but it's all part of the same footprint, it's all part of the same work. It's not a separate building that we're building for that purpose.
You're welcome, Councillor Breton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question through you to Lee is, Lee, a few years ago, and I certainly wasn't around, but I recall when we held up development here for a short period of time because of work at the wastewater plant. What was done up there at that time? Do you recall, or it's not fair to ask you, but are you aware of what went on up there?
Through the chairman to council, it was prior to my time here. My understanding is that there were some concerns with being able to develop, and as such, they did some interim patching work to get us through so the development could continue. So we would continue to collect the funds to be able to fund these kind of projects on a going forward basis. The intention was that was always meant to be an interim solution, knowing that this larger project was coming in a further time.
Well, my understanding was it was not a minor amount of money that was involved in that. I think it was, not recall, a couple of years hold up on development and a substantial amount of money. But maybe I'm wrong. But just another question on that. When, like the cost here, what is 13 million, roughly? If I read that right, 13 million, and I think Waterford's in at, what, 14 million? When, I've asked this question before, and that is, what does these large expenditures on these facilities allow us to do in terms of development in these communities? Like there's, okay, we're expanding the wastewater plant, but do we have the water supply to go along with that? I'm looking for some kind of rationale for each urban area where we spend these large amounts of money. Can you answer that? Or maybe I'm not as clear as I should be, but I'm looking for some kind of figure that tells me, okay, if we spend $14 million in Waterford, we can, that allows us to expand that municipality by X number residential or X number of gallons, or some form of figure that we can put my head around, I guess.
Through the chairman to Councillor Brunton, it's not as simple as this dollar equals this amount of development. The official plan outlines the development growth for Norfolk County, and through Development and Cultural Services, they advise Public Works of the targets for population growth, the expected population growth, what council has approved for growth. Public Works then in turn takes those numbers and determines what we need to facilitate the development of those, to allow those developments to proceed based on the numbers that have been approved for development for our areas. As it stands right now, we do not have direction from council to focus development in one area. So as such, development is taking place in a variety of urban areas within Norfolk County, and as such, we have to upgrade the infrastructure. When we base the sizing, et cetera, of the infrastructure, some of the things that we're considering with respect to that sizing is the population growth within the life expectancy of the facility. So if we're not expecting we design the facility so that by the time the life expectancy is done, the facility's at capacity. We don't want to be designing a facility that's twice as big as the growth that we expect before the equipment run, or before the infrastructure has depleted, because we don't need to overbuild something if we're not actually going to use it. It costs us money to maintain and operate something on an ongoing basis, so we try to base it on that. So when you see these proposals come forward, this one in particular, this is for the headworks and the wet well construction, both of which are there now, but all have to be redone. And as you're aware, the facility was not actually even operating at its approved levels. It wasn't capable due to the limitations that we had. This is also project also includes our biosolids treatment and storage, and that is used for a variety of facilities. It's not just the Simcoe facility; it is spread out amongst some of our other facilities as well at this location. So to sort of go back around to answering your question, we don't identify necessarily the number of houses that can fit into this or the amount of development, but we look at the wastewater flow. In this particular case, we look at the wastewater flows that are expected to be generated in the life expectancy of the facility, and we make that match.
Well, I guess what you just said is that, I guess planning, or they gave you some figures of population growth. Our population hasn't grown very much in the last 10 or 15 years, so I guess, you know, it's water in, water out to me, but I'd like to know what figures you're using. Well, you said this one here in Simcoe is basically rebuilds of two parts of the plant, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, but I think a couple of years ago, we had to expand the plant in order to allow development to proceed, if I'm not mistaken. And I stand to be corrected on that, but I was involved with a subdivision, and we were held up because of that. So I'm wondering, like, can we get some of those figures from planning or whatever that you're like, what are they projecting? 100,000 people here in the next few years in Norfolk County?
Councillor, I'll interject on that only to remind all of us that we do have a population growth study that was paid for just within the last couple of years. Hempson, thank you very much, Mayor Luke. And that was the basis, along with previous studies that Public Works had done relative to population growth. So these expansions or upgrades are being based on the existing population projections that we have and that we rely on as a corporation.
Well, perhaps I could see those. And
Yes,
maybe,
absolutely, because you're right. They may have been done before you did arrive on the scene. So,
all right, and that breaks it down by urban area, I assume.
yes.
Very good. Thank you very much.
And the other thing I'd like to add to what Ms. Robinson has said is notwithstanding whether there's population growth, we cannot allow one of our facilities to go down.
Oh, I realize.
So we've got to maintain the quality of the operation of the infrastructure just to maintain present growth safely and in compliance.
I realize
Yeah,
that. But
okay.
I understand there's a lot of work, and we're talking millions of dollars here.
Sure are.
And so I'd like to see that report. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Black next, I believe.
That population projection document, wasn't that done the last couple of years?
Yes, it was. I think Mayor
Yeah,
Luke
because
reminded
I know
us the last 2 or 3
I
years.
have a copy of it.
Pardon?
I do have a copy of it.
Yes, I understand, but I'm just suggesting maybe Councillor Brunton may not,
Well, you don't
as a
have
new
one?
member of council.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, they should
Yeah.
get one then. Yeah, I'm sure staff will give them one, so. But, yeah, Mike, I was going to move the recommendation in the report and speak to it.
All right, thank you.
And
Okay.
just to say that, Mr. Chairman, I did do I've been up there a number of times since the life of that facility, and it never ceases to amaze me, you know, how many buildings there are and how much work. I feel that it's like a never-ending project, that every year there's not thousands of dollars, but millions of dollars going into it, and I understand it's probably a $50 million facility if you were to build it new, compared to, say, Waterford at 12 or whatever, or Delhi, just because of the size of the communities. And I've had a recent tour with Bob Field, and he did show me that administrative building And it is a real hodgepodge, and it is a real safety problem, and it's, he identified that to me when on this tour that I did take with him. So I have seen it, and I can see that there is a need to upgrade that. So that's why I moved the recommendation in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Height, then Geisens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the treasurer. Is that allowed?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Through you to Mr. Ford. I noticed we're looking at $12.2 million worth of debentures on this one. 11.8 is going to be rate funded and 480K from a levy. Would that be the property tax levy?
Mr. Ford?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, that's correct. That would be the portion of the project that would be funded from the tax side of the house. The rest of it's funded from the water, wastewater side of the house.
So how is that determination made? Why are tax...
I'm sorry, what?
How is that determination made? Like, how are taxpayers in other areas ended up paying up for this tab? I thought our stuff had to be 100% rate funded.
Well, it depends on the work that's actually being done. When we replace a road or a portion of a road, that's typically funded from the rate side of the house, or the levy side of the house. And when we do some other kinds of work, there may be, like some water and wastewater, excuse me, works, there may be some components of it that would be typically funded from the levy side of the house. I don't know what those actual costs are right now. I can find them, but it depends on what actual work is being done.
Okay,
And that's
so
a relatively small amount being funded from the levy side. I mean, it's 720 grand's a lot of money, but
it is small, and that's why I'm kind of curious why it would...
I'm sorry, 400.
And we're debenturing it as well. So for a small amount to be
Yeah,
debentured through the levy.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what we typically do for, a project of this magnitude, I mean, this is $13 million. We could fund the road portion of it out of the levy budget, or the levy side of the tax levy side of the house, absolutely. But for a $13 million project, typically we'd fund that because of the magnitude of it, the life of the project, et cetera, it would typically be funded, all of it funded from debt.
Okay, and then how does DC funding tie into this, development charges?
Well, even if we replace an existing, through you, Mr. Chairman, even if we replace an existing piece of infrastructure, say for example, and that's not the case here, but I'll give you an example that's really easy to get your head wrapped around. If we're taking out a 6-inch sewer and we're replacing it with an 8-inch sewer, why are we replacing it with an 8-inch sewer? Well, we want to put some excess capacity in there in the event that we need it for growth. That's funded from development charges. So we just, and it's a bit of a mathematical calculation in terms of how much of that project is really related to providing additional capacity. And, the consultants do an estimate of it and say that if we were to replace that, stick for stick, it would all be funded from the rate budget, the rate side of the house. If we're adding something to it, in terms of capacity or size or whatever the case may be, then part of that would be funded from development charges.
So how much of this project is funded from development charges? Because, like, further to Councillor Brunton's questioning, this is driven by demand and upkeep, but there will be a growth potential here, so some of that growth potential should be funded from DC, right?
Yes, it would be. I can't tell you what that number
But,
is.
and how does that get handled inside your note to us? Like,
It's what it would be included. We're just differentiating between the rate side of the house and the levy side of the house. On the rate side of the house, we have development charge reserve funds that are water and wastewater. On the other side, we've got development charge reserve funds that are related to levy side of the house projects. That would be included in the water wastewater component of the project. Some of it would be funded from development charges and some of it would be charged to the rate. I don't have that number right here, but it's available.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Geisens?
Thank you. I guess I must have fallen asleep when I seen $13 million. I'm on page 3 of the report, Simcoe Wastewater Treatment Facility Administration Building. $100,000 for an office? Is that what that $100,000 is for?
Through the chairman to Councillor Geisens, the engineering budget to deal with the administration was $100,000. That was the approved budget to date. It's not necessary. We ended up combining all of these things, which is why we're seeing the cost savings. We didn't ask the consultant to break out how much is going to this and how much is going to that. So we don't know exactly how much is going towards the administration side. We are required by our licenses as well as our environmental compliance approval to do certain testing on site and have certain things available. This building is to allow us to do that and to be in compliance. It's a working, we call it the administration building, but it's a working facility. It's like a lab and that sort of stuff where they have to do the work that's required by our licenses. That is correct.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the question. Any further questions in regards to this report? Seeing none, Councillor Black has moved that staff report PW 17-03 award of contract for consultant services, the Simcoe Wastewater Treatment Facility upgrades be received as information, and that the aforementioned project be awarded to HAC Corporation in the amount of $988,106, exclusive of HST, for services identified in their November the 8th, 2016 proposal and the Norfolk County RFP. And further, that a bylaw be enacted authorizing the mayor and clerk, manager of council services, to execute a contract with the firm of HAC Corporation. All those in favor? I see no one opposed, so that is carried. And that then, I believe, will take us to staff report PW 17-08, which is the award of contract for RFP PWE 1679, engineering services for the various Simcoe reconstruction projects. Ms. Robinson.
Through the chairman to council. Council approved the capital budget in October, and these projects were identified as part of that. Staff felt that we would see considerable savings in our engineering costs if we combined the projects into a single design tender. They will be issued separately for construction purposes, but for the purposes of design and engineering services, we felt that we would see a significant savings if we actually bundled them together as a single project. And as you can see, in accordance with the numbers that we received, we did see a considerable savings over what we'd estimated the engineering cost would be. And I'm asking that the contract be awarded to EXP Services Incorporated for $296,925, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Mayor Luke first.
Just one simple question through you to Lee. Lee, certainly I read through this, and it was good to see 13 packages picked up, good to see 9 submissions, and then it came down to that 4 proposals met the 80% benchmark, and you're recommending the lowest price one of roughly $297. I guess, seems to me, Mr. Chair, a question I have, and I don't know if Lee can answer, but other reports and other times we've seen what the other bids were, so that we often saw in our staff reports sort of how close the bids were and et cetera. And yet why would we not see the submitted price for the other 3 of the 4? I'm just curious whether there's some kind of reason that we don't show these anymore.
Through the chairman to the mayor, I think that there's a little bit of confusion between engineering services, which is done through an RFP, and a contract for a tender. So, for example, this is an RFP. So, in accordance with our purchasing policy, it's awarded on the lowest price per point. So, their technical score is very important in addition to their price. So you can't, by evaluating the price per point, you can't actually tell how close prices were because it's based on their technical merits. The numbers that you're referring to are to do with our construction contracts, and in our construction contracts, the tenders come in and we can list them because we simply award to the lowest based on that. So I think right now as we're looking at a bunch of proposals, and as such, they're evaluated in accordance with the purchasing policy on a price per point, not a lowest price value.
Okay, so just in general terms, and I'm not going to belabor this, I certainly understand when we're tendering for a new fire truck, we see the, so what you're telling me through the chair, Lee, is basically, you can't tell me, and we know EXP is the top one being recommended, but the second one, let's say on the list, here, you can't tell me they were far close behind or a long ways off.
We can certainly include the price per point for all of them, should council wish to have that on a going forward basis. I think what I was trying to articulate, and clearly not very well, was that I can't list the price, I can't list all the prices for you because we don't evaluate these on a price basis. So like if the one engineering firm submitted $500,000, another one submitted 600,000, another one submitted 700, I can't articulate that in here because we only evaluate them on a price per point.
Okay, and that's fine. I know I don't want, that's
So
fine.
if you'd like us on a going forward
No.
basis to include all the prices per point, I can do that
No,
as well.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. And before I go to my next speaker, on that same point, Lee, it's my understanding, and the county manager's not here, Mr. Ford might be able to enlighten us. It's my understanding we will receive a report on a review of our purchasing policy, I believe sometime in the first half of 2017. I'm going to ask for either consent or disagreement with that.
Response to your question, Mr. Chairman, yes. There's, because of the implementation of a new purchasing system, it's going to require that a number of policies that deal with purchasing are going to have to be revised. And so council's going to see over the next probably 5 or 6 months a number of different policies coming forward that need to be changed in order to A, dovetail with the new purchasing procurement process and systems, and B, to dovetail with them and to clean up some things that are kind of a little long in the tooth and need updating in terms of our current requirements. So we're kind of killing two birds with one stone, so to speak. Cleaning up some of those processes and cleaning up some of that history, and also putting new stuff in because we've got new business systems in behind it that we're going to do purchasing a little differently. And all that will be coming sometime, I would expect, before mid-year.
Thank you. And Mayor Luke, the only reason I brought that up is I know this particular point that you raised is one that I think that has been raised before by others as well as yourself. And I think we should, as council, take a kick at some of these things because I share your interest, if nothing else, in some of this other information as a matter of course, even if it's confidential. My next speaker is Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions are on page 49 of our agenda, and I guess they would be through you to John, if I may, John. The total project estimate right now is 4.9. Am I correct? Capital budget estimate.
Yes, that's what it is for the total of all the projects.
Okay, and then you had it laid out underneath there in such a way, but with the big savings in engineering, all these reserve funds would have been more would have been taken out of these reserve funds had we gone ahead with 645,000. Is that a way to
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I understand what you're saying. Let me say it back to you a little bit differently.
Okay.
That as a result of combining these tenders,
Right.
these three projects,
Right.
we're going to pay change back from $300,000 for engineering services instead of $645. So we're going to take $300,000 out of funding from whatever source instead of $645,000.
That's right. But my question, and don't take this the wrong way, when you say roads reserve fund, there is no money in that refund, right? Am I correct? It's in a deficit already, right?
It is right now, but I'm anticipating that with some changes that we're making as we move forward, that it will still be in a deficit, but not anywhere near as bad as it is.
I realize that, but I guess,
Mr. Chairman, maybe what I need to do is to reiterate something I said during the capital budget review. What we do is we say this project needs to be funded, because of the nature of it, it needs to be funded from the roads reserve,
right.
okay? Because of the nature of it and all the rest of that stuff. The fact that the roads reserve is in a deficit is a financing issue. So we need to issue debt, or we need to do something to reduce that negative balance in the road reserve.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean that we should not do the projects. It just means I have to, not anybody else. I have to find a way to take that deficit away.
Correct. I
Okay.
understand that.
Yeah.
But can you tell me I know these other reserve funds, and I guess we will get a statement in our new budget coming up. Are they pretty much all in a deficit, or are any of those three in the positive?
The Water Capital Replacement Reserve Fund, the Wastewater Capital Replacement Reserve Fund, they're all in, I'll put it in quotation marks, pretty good shape.
Good. Okay, right.
The road reserve isn't, but we're working on improving that. And the Interior Community Infrastructure Fund, that's just the funding that we get from the provincial government, and it doesn't have a reserve fund.
Yeah, I kind of look at it, at the bottom line there where it says we are saving, let's say, $300 and something thousand. We're just not spending that much money. We're not saving it because we don't have it to start off with. Correct?
Well, I think it depends on whether you want to look at the glass is half full or the glass is half empty.
Gotcha.
I would say that this is a really good news story because we're going to spend 300 grand less than we planned.
I realize that.
And if it's determined that the council doesn't want to spend that money at all, then that's a whole different kettle of fish.
I gotcha. No, I'm trying to, I don't know, this amazes me how we have reserve funds with nothing in them, but thanks.
Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seeing as how we saved $345,000 from grouping some projects and some competitive bidding, I'll move that recommendation and prosperous new year.
Okay, thank you. Speaking to the motion then, Councillor Black.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Lee. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with, is it EXP services? Have we used them before?
Main Street, Port Dover.
Okay, so you're happy with them and there's the services they provided?
We're satisfied that they're able to do this work, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. Any further speakers? Seeing none, Councillor Height has moved that staff report PW 17-08, award of contract RFP E1679, the engineering services for the Simcoe reconstruction projects be received as information, and that a bylaw be prepared authorizing the mayor and clerk, manager of council services, to execute a contract with the firm of EXP Services, Inc. for the contract in the amount of $296,925, excluding taxes. Those in favor of that motion? I see no one opposed to it, so it is carried. Thank you very much for that, Council. We do have one item of correspondence. There's no motion here to that effect, is there, Mr. Clerk? Which we do have to have a motion to receive this as information. Mayor Luke will move that we receive the correspondence from the Delhi Community Health Center Committee as information. Do you wish to say something, Mayor Luke, about it?
Yeah,
Thank you.
if you don't mind, Councillor from Delhi, Mike Columbus is not here this evening. I just want to say that I tip my hat off to the Delhi Community Health Center Board and, of course, to Chairperson Dale Corner for this bit of correspondence. they fully recognize that we have lots of places to spend our money. They recognize that they still have 50,000 coming in 2017 and the final payment of 50,000 in 2018. And so they wish to defer their request that they made a few months back. And just on a good note, the construction of this third phase of the Delhi Medical Center started on December the 8th. So they're moving full speed ahead, and they expect certainly by late summer this facility to be up and going, if not sooner. This addition to the facility.
Thank you. Any further speakers to this, receiving this information? If not, those in favor, please. I see no one opposed, so that is carried. We do have one item to deal with in camera, and for the purposes of the media, this relates to appointments to advisory committees. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Wells. Is that okay, given he is not here? Yeah, Councillor Wells had to leave for personal reasons, and his name was on the motion. Is someone else prepared? Thank you, Councillor Black. Yeah, okay. Councillor Black has moved that the committee convene in a closed session at 7:52 p.m. to discuss one item pursuant to Section 239 of the Municipal Act as the subject matter pertains to personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we will be in for, I think, only probably 10, 15 minutes max. Bring those with us, Andy. We'll get some other